Welcome to the Cenario Podcast, your guide to mental health and well-being. Each episode, we uncover practical tools, discuss expert insights, and explore how supplements can transform your mental health journey. Get ready to learn, grow, and thrive with us.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at something pretty important, I think, and that's the impact of trauma on mental health.
Ooh.
Yeah, we've got some really fascinating sources here that cover a lot of ground. So we're going to be defining trauma and exploring its effects on the brain, and we'll even be looking at ways to heal.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, you might be surprised to learn that trauma isn't always caused by those major life-threatening events.
Right.
Yeah, even those seemingly small or repeated negative experiences can really have a huge impact on our mental well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think it really challenges the common misconception that trauma only comes from, those big life-altering events, like you said.
Right. It's like we often think of trauma as something so dramatic, something you might see in the movies, but the reality is much more nuanced, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me about this. What's fascinating to me is this concept of big T versus little t trauma.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, it really highlights, I think, the spectrum of experiences that can have, that lasting mark on our mental health.
Okay, so break that down for me. What's the difference?
So big T trauma refers to those major events, right? So things like natural disasters or serious accidents or experiencing violence.
Okay.
These are the experiences that often create, that really intense, overwhelming sense of fear and helplessness.
So events that most people would agree are objectively traumatic.
Exactly.
Okay.
But then we have little height trauma,
Okay.
which refers to those repeated or ongoing stressful experiences that might not be life-threatening, but they can still, chip away at a person's emotional well-being over time.
Oh, that's interesting. So what kinds of things would fall into that category?
Yeah, so think about things like chronic bullying or emotional neglect during childhood, or even a really difficult breakup.
Oh, yeah.
Individually, these events might not seem, as intense as big T trauma, but that cumulative effect can be really significant.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people go through those little hide experiences, but we don't always connect them to the idea of trauma.
Right.
It's just sort of well, that was rough, but I got through it. But the impact can still linger.
Absolutely. And that's why I think understanding this broader definition of trauma is so important, because even though those experiences might seem less severe, on the surface, they can still lead to anxiety, depression, relationship issues, and even symptoms that kind of mirror post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow. So even without that classic idea of a big T trauma, major life-threatening event, someone could be experiencing PTSD-like symptoms from these smaller, repeated traumas.
That's right.
Wow.
And the way that trauma manifests can vary so much from person to person, too.
Yeah, how so?
It can be emotional, psychological, or even physical.
Oh, wow.
It's not just about the event itself. It's really about how that event interacts with your individual history, your coping mechanisms, and your support system.
So what might some of those manifestations look like? I mean, what should people be aware of?
So imagine feeling constantly on edge.
Okay.
Like you're always waiting for something bad to happen, or, you're anticipating danger even when you're in safe situations.
Right.
That's hypervigilance.
Okay.
And it's a really common symptom of trauma.
I can see how that would be really exhausting.
Yeah.
Constantly being in that state of heightened alert.
Exactly. And, it can impact your sleep, your concentration, your relationships.
Yeah.
You might find yourself withdrawing from social situations or having difficulty regulating your emotions.
Right. And you mentioned physical symptoms too.
Yes.
So what would those look like?
So trauma can dysregulate your body's stress response system, and that can lead to chronic pain, digestive issues, sleep disturbances, even a weakened immunity.
Wow.
It's like your body gets stuck in that fight or flight mode even when there's no immediate threat.
So it's incredible how interconnected our minds and bodies are.
Oh, for sure.
That it's not just affecting our thoughts and feelings, but it's impacting our physical well-being.
Right. And, beyond those more general symptoms, trauma can also contribute to the development of specific mental health conditions.
So it's not just about experiencing those symptoms in isolation.
Yeah.
But it can lead to more serious mental health challenges.
Unfortunately, that's often the case.
Wow.
So, conditions like PTSD, anxiety disorders, depression, and even substance abuse can be linked to past trauma.
It's interesting because we often think of these conditions as separate things.
Right.
But recognizing trauma as a potential root cause could really shift how we approach treatment and support.
I completely agree. I think understanding the role of trauma can be a game changer in helping people heal.
Right.
So, for example, Someone who's struggling with an anxiety disorder might find traditional therapy much more effective if it also addresses any underlying trauma that they've experienced.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about big T and little t trauma and how it manifests in different ways and how it can lead to other mental health challenges. But I'm really curious about how all of this plays out in the brain. Can you give us the science behind that?
Of course. Yeah, this is where it gets really fascinating.
Okay.
Our sources delve into, the specific areas of the brain that are most impacted by trauma and how these changes can explain some of the symptoms that we've been talking about.
Yeah, so which brain areas are we talking about?
So the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex are all significantly affected by trauma.
Okay.
You can think of the amygdala as your brain's alarm system, so it's responsible for detecting threats and triggering the fear response.
Okay.
Trauma can actually make the amygdala overly sensitive, so it starts firing off alarms even when you're in safe situations.
Oh, wow. So it's like constantly on high alert.
Exactly.
Leading to that hypervigilance we were talking about.
Exactly. And then we have the hippocampus, which plays a key role in memory processing and consolidation.
Okay.
Trauma can disrupt the hippocampus's functioning, making it difficult to form clear and coherent memories of the traumatic event.
So that's why people with PTSD might have fragmented memories or experience flashbacks.
Precisely. Yeah, if the hippocampus isn't functioning properly, it's almost like the traumatic memory gets stored differently, leading to those intrusive flashbacks and those emotional triggers.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
And then finally, we have the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive functions, like planning, decision-making, emotional regulation.
Okay.
Trauma can reduce activity in the prefrontal cortex, making it harder to control impulses, manage emotions, and think clearly under stress.
So it's like trauma throws off the brain's entire balance, impacting our ability to think rationally, regulate our emotions, and even form coherent memories.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
But, understanding those neurological changes, I think it really helps us move away from blaming people for their struggles, and it really fosters, I think, a more compassionate approach to healing.
Right.
And that's what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, before we go there, let's take a quick step back and make sure we're all on the same page. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part. We've explored the different types of trauma,
Yeah.
right, from big T to little t.
Yes.
We've talked about how it manifests in all these different ways, emotionally, psychologically, physically. And then we dove into the world of neuroscience to explore how trauma can actually change the structure and function of the brain.
Absolutely.
All really amazing stuff.
Okay.
So stay tuned, because when we come back, we'll be looking at all the different paths to healing and recovery from trauma.
Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were really getting into the nitty-gritty of how trauma affects the brain.
Yeah.
But I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that our sources really emphasized, and that's that healing is possible.
Yeah, it's so crucial to remember that, trauma can have this profound impact.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to define you.
Right.
Our brains are incredibly adaptable.
Yeah.
And there are so many paths to healing and reclaiming your life.
So where do we even begin?
Yeah.
What are some of those paths that our sources highlight?
Well, therapy is often a cornerstone of trauma recovery.
Yeah. It provides that safe and supportive space to process those experiences and develop healthy coping mechanisms.
Our sources mentioned a few specific types of therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT.
Right.
Can you explain how that works in the context of trauma?
Absolutely. So CBT is all about recognizing and changing those negative thought patterns and behaviors that can kind of keep you stuck in that cycle of fear and anxiety.
Okay.
So for someone who's experienced trauma, CBT might involve identifying those unhelpful beliefs that have emerged, maybe feelings of self-blame or a sense of powerlessness.
So it's about challenging those automatic negative thoughts that can pop up after a traumatic experience.
Exactly. CBT helps you kind of develop a more balanced and realistic perspective,
Right.
which can then lead to healthier behaviors and emotional regulation.
Okay, that makes sense. Our sources also talked about eye movement desensitization and reprocessing EMDR.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, EMDR is a really interesting approach that uses bilateral stimulation, so things like eye movements or hand taps or sounds.
To help your brain process traumatic memories in a less distressing way.
Okay.
And it's thought to work by kind of reducing the emotional intensity that's attached to those memories.
So you're not trying to like erase the memory, but rather change how your brain reacts to it.
Exactly. You're taking the sting out of the memory. It's still there, but it doesn't have the same power over you anymore.
That's fascinating. Are there other types of therapy that are particularly helpful for trauma?
Yeah, our sources also mention trauma-focused therapy, which is specifically designed to address the unique challenges of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It might involve a combination of techniques like cognitive processing therapy or prolonged exposure therapy or even art therapy.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
It sounds like there are all these different therapeutic tools that can be tailored to the individual's needs and the nature of their trauma.
Precisely. And, therapy is just one piece of the puzzle. Our sources also highlight the importance of mindfulness and grounding techniques. Oh yeah, what are those and how can they help someone who's experienced trauma?
So think of mindfulness as the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Okay.
It can be as simple as focusing on your breath, noticing the sensations in your body, or even just paying attention to the sounds around you.
And I can see how that would be helpful in calming those racing thoughts and anxieties that often accompany trauma.
Absolutely. And grounding techniques are especially helpful for managing dissociation,
Okay.
which we talked about earlier, that feeling of being detached from yourself or your surrounding.
Right. It's like being spaced out or disconnected from reality.
Exactly. Grounding techniques involve using your senses to reconnect with the present moment.
Okay.
So it could be as simple as feeling the texture of an object or noticing the colors in your environment or even tasting something, with a strong flavor.
Okay.
It's about bringing your attention back to your body and the physical world around you.
So it's like a way to anchor yourself in the present when your mind is trying to escape to the past or the future.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And beyond these individual practices, our sources also emphasize the importance of social support and community healing.
Why is that so crucial?
Well, trauma can be incredibly isolating.
Right.
It can make you feel like no one understands what you're going through.
Yeah.
But connecting with others who have had similar experiences can be incredibly validating and empowering.
It's that feeling of, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Which I think can be so powerful in breaking down those walls of shame and isolation.
Exactly. And, finding those supportive connections can come in many forms, support groups, therapy groups, even just spending time with loved ones who can offer, a listening ear and a compassionate presence.
It sounds like building a network of support is a really key part of healing from trauma.
Absolutely. And our sources also talk about the importance of self-care practices.
Okay.
Like exercise, healthy eating, and quality sleep.
Yeah.
It's easy to neglect those basic needs when you're struggling. But taking care of your physical health can have a profound impact on your mental and emotional well-being.
It's like nourishing your body from the inside out.
Yeah.
It can also nourish your mind and spirit.
Precisely. And finally, our sources talk about creative outlets, things like journaling art music, or even spending time in nature as ways to process emotions and find meaning in your experiences.
So it's about finding healthy ways to express yourself and release those pent-up emotions that might be difficult to put into words.
That's a great way to summarize it, and remember, healing is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs, and it's okay to ask for help along the way.
Right.
Seeking professional support is a sign of strength, not weakness.
That's such an important message, that it's okay to not have all the answers, and it's more than okay to reach out for guidance and support. So we've talked about therapy, mindfulness, social support, self-care, and creative outlets. Are there any other key takeaways about healing that you think our listeners should keep in mind?
One thing that really stood out to me was the concept of post-traumatic growth.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully understand it. Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, it's this idea that while trauma can be incredibly painful, it can also be a catalyst for positive change.
Okay.
People who've gone through trauma often develop a deeper appreciation for life, stronger relationships, a greater sense of purpose, and a newfound resilience.
That's incredible. It's like finding the strength to bloom even in the most challenging environments.
Exactly. And that resilience, that ability to find meaning and purpose amidst adversity, is a testament to the human spirit's incredible capacity for healing.
So it's not about erasing the trauma or pretending it never happened, but rather about finding ways to integrate those experiences into your story without letting them define you.
Precisely. And that process, can take time and patience and a lot of self-compassion. It's okay to have setbacks. It's okay to feel overwhelmed at times,
Yeah.
The key is to keep moving forward one step at a time.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add about healing from trauma?
I think the most important thing to remember is that healing is possible, even though the journey might be challenging. There are so many resources available,
Right.
from therapy and support groups to mindfulness practices and self-care strategies. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Right.
There are people who care, people who understand, and people who want to help.
Absolutely. And with the right support, you can move beyond the trauma and create a life filled with hope and resilience.
I love that.
So we'll be right back after a quick pause to wrap up our deep dive into understanding trauma. Welcome back to the show, everyone. So we're here for our final part of our deep dives into trauma and its impact on mental health. And I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From, understanding the different types of trauma to exploring the science behind how it affects the brain.
Right. And we also delved into the many paths to healing, highlighting, the importance of therapy, mindfulness, social support, self-care, and even the potential for post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, it's been a really insightful journey, and I hope our listeners are feeling more informed and empowered.
Me too. Yeah, knowledge is the first step towards healing.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think first and foremost, I hope they understand that trauma is far more common than we often realize. It's not something that only happens in these really extreme circumstances.
Right.
Those little shoot traumas, those everyday struggles and heartbreaks, those can also have a lasting impact.
Right. It's about recognizing that trauma exists on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And there's no hierarchy of pain.
Exactly.
Your experience is valid regardless of what caused it.
Exactly. And I hope listeners also understand that there's no shame in seeking help.
Yeah.
It's a sign of strength and self-awareness to recognize when you need support.
And there's so many resources available too, from therapy and support groups to online resources and self-help books.
Oh, for sure.
You don't have to go through this alone.
Absolutely. And I think it's also crucial for listeners to understand that, healing is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There will be ups and downs, good days and bad days.
Right.
And it's not about erasing the trauma or pretending it never happened.
Yeah.
But it's rather about, finding ways to integrate those experiences into your story without letting them define you.
It's about reclaiming your narrative, recognizing your resilience,
Yeah.
and moving forward with hope and a sense of agency.
That's a powerful message.
It is so maybe a final thought-provoking question for our listeners to consider.
Okay.
How can you apply this newfound knowledge about trauma to better understand your own experiences or to support someone who might be struggling?
That's a great question to ponder. I think we all have a role to play in creating a more trauma-informed world. A world where people feel safe and supported and empowered to seek help when they need it.
And sometimes that support can be as simple as listening with an open heart.
Yeah.
Or offering words of encouragement.
Right.
Or simply letting someone know that they're not alone.
Exactly. Small acts of kindness and compassion can make a world of difference.
Well, on that note,
Yeah.
I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into understanding trauma. Thank you all so much for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it informative, insightful, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Yeah. And remember, healing is possible. Never give up hope.
Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Thanks for tuning in to the Cenario podcast. Don't forget to visit Cenario.com for more expert tips, articles, and supplements designed to support your mental health. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time, take care of yourself.